Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the Democrats in the House are moving towards, I guess, trying to oust this Marjorie Taylor Greene, censure her, have her thrown off of committees. Not quite sure just yet where they're going, but something's going to happen. Evidently, Steny Hoyer had a conversation with Kevin McCarthy. They're going to think of something. You got Debbie Wasserman Schultz now coming out and saying that she's going to introduce a resolution to strip her of her committee assignments, which I got to be honest, I really want this crazy woman on the Education Committee. I do. I want to see just how crazy she is because, hey, did you know the Jews have space lasers that start fires? Yeah, how about that? Space lasers. And I guess I'll go with, with Donald Trump's Space Force. And here to share some thoughts on space lasers. Do we need them? Did they start the fires? I've asked our good friend Bill Scher to come back and talk with us. Bill is a contributing editor over at Politico magazine, and I'm sure now going, what the hell have I gotten myself into? Bill, thanks for taking time for us.
Always a pleasure.
Space lasers, Bill. Space lasers.
I never got my space laser membership card. Sad to say, I feel slighted.
I got to be honest. I want her on the Education Committee because I want people going, this is the reason we need education. Exhibit A.
Well, there was a Republican quote in Politico today saying the Democrats don't want to kick her out of Congress. The Democrats want her there to show everybody how crazy Republicans are. It's in the Republicans' interest to get rid of her and say, look, we're not crazy town. I mean, there's a whole debate going on how Trumpy should the party be, but there's some daylight between hardcore Trumper and Jewish conspiracy space laser woman, So, but it does seem like Democrats are going to force a vote on whether she can be on committees or not in the House. And it's just something else that's going to divide the Republican Party. And to be very blunt, I think a divided Republican Party is not just good for Democrats. I think it's good for America. I think it's, and I think perhaps healthy for the Republican Party in the long run. I don't think it is tenable for them to be a conspiracy theory party. Push will have to come to shove at some point, and they might be better off leaning into it and just having the fight.
No, I'm right there with you. I at some point, they've got to do something about their own. But, is this something during the middle of a pandemic the Democrats should be spending time on? I mean, I look at Gun Fetish Barbie, the one from Colorado. I'm perfectly happy with her there. She's making tons of money for people on the left who are raising funds off of just how crazy she is. She's not going to get anything done because she's the outlier of the party. At least I hope. So it'll be interesting to see how the Republicans handle both of them over the coming days.
Well, and I think a divided Republican Party is potentially good for America insofar as it may free up some Republicans to cooperate with Democrats, to make very clear, this is not where we want the party to go. We don't want this to be a conspiracy theory party. And I'm not going to be subject to pressure from Donald Trump and others to make me be in allegiance with them. I don't know how it's all going to pan out at the end of the day, but I think if there ever is to be hope of actual bipartisanship, it starts there with Republicans no longer being a unified party.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I just don't see it. And this is where, I sit back and I go, they have shown me at no point are they willing to let one of their own go. I mean, if this were a Democrat, they would have resigned 10 ways to Sunday by now. If this were Al Franken, he'd have been out the door by now. They'd have had his.
He was out the door.
Packed. I know they'd have had his stuff already packed. They would have just had the threat of a vote. It'll be interesting to see if the Republicans actually pull the trigger. I don't think they're going to.
I'm not convinced they're going to. A majority of Republicans will vote to block her from committees. I bet somebody does. I mean, you had the 10 House Republicans that voted to impeach Trump.
Yeah.
Those 10 may vote to join Democrats in barring Greene from committees. And if I understand correctly, I mean, I think they can do it on a majority vote.
Yeah, just a straight majority vote. But here's the thing: what if they don't, and you have the Democrats who are doing it just by themselves, and you turn the Republican Party even further to the extreme, to where any of those 10 then end up being on the chopping block as someone crazier primaries them in a couple of years, and the Republican Party keeps going off the cliff. And I now look at this guy Adam Kinzinger, I guess his name is, Republican from Illinois, who's now trying to take up the Trump mantle with this Country First PAC that he's starting.
Well, he's anti-Trump. He's one of the 10.
Oh,
he's one of the folks that voted to impeach.
That's right.
He's trying to flip the America First
right
into Country First.
So do you see that taking in any legs?
Well, I mean, I think it shows that there's not really that much of a moderate conservative split in the Republican Party.
Right.
I do think there is a rational Republican and irrational Republican split. And Kinzinger is on the rational Republican side. I think the faction of House Republicans in that camp is a lot smaller. And the bigger question is, how much of it do we see on the Senate side? Senate Republicans, by and large, voted to certify the Electoral College count, whereas a majority of House Republicans did not. And now we're going to see if there is real merit and weight between what these 10 Senate Republicans are doing on pandemic relief. If there is a real good faith attempt to find common ground with Biden, or is this performative and it won't go anywhere and Democrats will have no choice but to do it through reconciliation at the end of the day?
Yeah, I don't see the fact that they have no money whatsoever for states and local governments, to me, just is almost a non-starter, and they have to know that that's almost a non-starter.
Well, I think Biden came in with a high bid, and Collins came in with a low bid, and I mean, so the House plan, sorry, the Republican plan, if I'm correct, does not have the state and local. I don't believe it has the rental assistance. I don't believe it has extended paid leave. It does a $15 minimum wage, and it's not as expansive when it comes to targeted payments. So forgive me if I'm missing an element there.
That's about it.
But so there's a number of pieces that they don't have that Biden does have. Where there is commonality is that both sides agree that the economy remains in distress and more deficit spending is needed.
Right.
And now they're haggling over, size and scope. So I don't think it is implausible that the difference can be split. I'm not going to make predictions at this stage of the game by any stretch. But there was a debate over state and local in the last round of pandemic relief, and they ended up doing some backdoor things. They ended up doing some targeted state and local government stuff that wasn't as big as what Democrats wanted, but it was more than zero. So that's the kind of thing where there's some evidence that they can find the middle ground. So I don't know if that is going to be the biggest sticking point. Rental assistance might be a very big sticking point. Where they do the income level for the payments might be a sticking point. I can't know yet because this is so early. And the fact that, well, I shouldn't say the fact that if Democrats pass the budget resolution this week, early next week, and just for folks know, I'm getting into the parliamentarian weeds here, but to do budget reconciliation that prevents a filibuster, under the rules, you have to do a budget resolution first. The budget resolution has the reconciliation instructions to the committees, and then they write the piece of the reconciliation bill. So if Democrats have 50 votes for the resolution this week, the reconciliation process will move alongside the bipartisan talks that started today with Biden and the Collins Group of 10. No one's talking about this right now. I'm not expecting it, but just in theory, if, say, Joe Manchin raises his hand and says, I want this bipartisan, I'm not going to vote for the budget resolution. I'm not going to let you go down the reconciliation path. That changes the whole equation. Right. My guess is that won't happen because reconciliation gives Democrats leverage in the bipartisan talks. They can say, hey, Susan Collins, if you don't meet us halfway or more than halfway, we have another round. So if you want to do this, if you really want to do this, if you want the credit for doing this, I mean, there's reason for Republicans to do this, because if they don't, Democrats get all the credit. If Republicans want some of the credit, they got to play ball. And so we'll see how much they want the credit.
No, and it's a perfect way of laying it out. And it gets into the weeds and it gets complicated for people. But as you've pointed out, look, we can go a bipartisan route where there's going to be some give and take, or the Democrats, if they have the 50 votes and Joe Manchin is part of that, they can ram it through. I would prefer it not be rammed through. I would prefer that we save that budget reconciliation for when we need other stuff.
Well, that's part of the delicate dance here. I mean, on one hand, I'm a pretty Machiavellian guy. Get what you can get with the votes that you have.
Right.
So, in and of itself, it makes perfect logical sense to say if you can get more with 50, then go get more. Where it gets a little complicated. Well, first number one, I don't think we know Democrats have the 50. And if I'm Chuck Schumer, I'm not going to assume I have the 50 unless I've been told I have the 50. Joe Manchin has not said, I'm going to pass the reconciliation, whatever you put in front of me. Angus King said early on, this is a monopoly money. He's given a little bit of a red flag. He doesn't like the price tag where it stands. So maybe they'll come around. Maybe they don't want to be, the party poopers here. I'm not going to assume it at this juncture until they say it. Right. But let's say they do come on board for the 50, you can get more with their support. Does that mean Democrats get less beyond this point because they can't easily pass a second reconciliation bill, or they have soured the Susan Collins group to say, you guys aren't trustworthy, I don't want to do this to you anymore. That means you can't do immigration reform as easily. Maybe you can't do climate as easily. Maybe you can't do infrastructure as easily. I don't know. I'm just saying there are several elements here that the negotiators are going to have to weigh before pulling the trigger on whichever route that they take.
Yeah. But at the end of it, the latest poll that I saw on it, which is, this Greenberg-Quinlan, Rossner research poll, that says, over 3/4 of the country is in favor of moving on a stimulus. It is very popular. People want this. People need this. And I think you're right. I think the Republicans are going to want to come into it and say, hey, we did something, even if it means, we didn't help as many people, or, especially those Democratic cities, because that's, for me, what the McConnell part is. The reason they don't want to help state and local governments is because they know that Democratic cities and states are going to overwhelmingly do better in this than Republican cities. And I hate thinking that way, but that appears to be the way it is.
I think it's the way that some of them are thinking. I don't think that makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, there are blue cities in red states that will get helped by this. I don't see where Republicans should be mad if Birmingham, Alabama gets money, or Jackson, Mississippi gets money. They're gonna, it's not gonna just help blue people by doing that. But your point about the poll numbers is very important here. The Republican Party in general and the Group of 10, they don't have any messaging at all right now to say why the Biden plan is bad. They're not building up momentum to cut out key elements of it. So that weakens their position and potentially makes it easier to come to an eventual deal, because they're not weakening the ground that Biden is standing on. Now, the one thing that can weaken it is if Joe Manchin raises his hand and says, no way, no how am I doing 1.9 trillion. I mean, that's nothing to do with poll numbers. I mean, some people tell me, well, people in West Virginia don't want Manchin to do that. The governor of West Virginia doesn't want Joe Manchin to do that. That may all be true, but Joe Manchin might just do what he wants to do because he doesn't answer to anybody but himself. He's 73 years old. He may not even run again. He has no obligation to stay in the Democratic Party. He may simply say, I'm a deficit hawk guy. I don't want to do that. I can't know. I'm just not going to make assumptions about where people stand until they say it.
All right.
But I would argue beyond Joe Manchin saying, this is the one substantive argument I've heard made by anybody that is critical of the Biden plan. And that is that the $2,000 checks, $1,400 plus the $600, should not go to upper income families. That's the one substantive argument I've heard made by anybody.
And I think everybody agrees with that.
Well, I mean, some people think some people think that bigger is better. That even rich folks will get the money and they'll spend it, and maybe some people won't fall through the cracks because you're not being overly restrictive about it. So there's arguments on both sides. But I'm just saying that's one counter argument I've heard, and I think the only one beyond just sort of general you shouldn't spend too much money. But that's a hard argument to make because you're already spending a lot of money either way.
Right.
There's no balanced budget happening right now, no matter what you do.
Yeah, but I got to be honest. I don't think Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett need it. I think where they put the number right around 150,000 for a couple, 75 for individuals, I think is not a bad thing. But I also think maybe there's got to be something there where if you did struggle, if you did lose employment, there's got to be help to get you somewhere where you were so that you don't fall further behind. So I think there's got to be some kind of needs test in this, because I know a lot of people who have not been affected by this at all, who are just going, hey, I got an extra couple $100, I got an extra couple grand. That's going to help me get even further ahead, which I'm not opposed to. But in a moment where you've got real people who are about to be kicked to the curb, I think we can have that discussion.
Well, and I think the macroeconomic argument against that is if you're already of means and you get an extra couple grand, you just pocket it. You don't put it back in the economy, and it doesn't have the same stimulative effect. If you're living on the edge, every dollar you get is going into a rent payment, groceries, paying off debt, something. It's not just sitting at home collecting dust, sitting in a bank account, barely making interest. That's the kind of thing where I think there's an argument for the more targeted approach. And so I would not be shocked at all if Biden's going to come down. He's going to come down there to some degree.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And as you said, Joe Manchin's going to be the key part of all this. And at the beginning, on Inauguration Day, that was my thing. Sadly, we're at the behest of Joe Manchin. I don't have great hopes.
Well, I don't think Manchin's an obstructionist. I think Manchin wants a bill one way or the other, and clearly, just going by Manchin's own words, he would prefer greatly that bill was bipartisan. Yeah. He thinks bipartisanship is a value in and of itself. A lot of people don't.
No, I don't. I think just getting something done. I just think we got to get stuff done, and for me, it's that simple. But Bill, I appreciate the time, man. It's always fun talking with you. Appreciate it, man.
You too. Take care.
Good stuff, our friend Bill Scher. Make sure you check out his work over at BillScher.com or BillScherMedia.com. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.